Good day, everyone. Juxtaposition here. Oh boy, TGIF to you, and I got a great barn burner of a video on my most favorite topic of all my topics. It includes murder, mendacity, deception, diversion, and banking, my most favorite subject. And I'm talking about my favorite type of private banking, money laundering. Money laundering involved deceptive money laundering facilities. And if you've been watching my channel for the past year, you know that foundations, endowments, Metropolitan Art, San Francisco Opera, the Louis M. Davies Symphony Hall, the Red Cross, located in Geneva, Switzerland, or the WHO, World Health Organization, and or the Boy Scouts of America, or the Young Republicans, or the Young Americans, and William F. Buckley's fingerprints on what I would call money laundering facilities. Any one of those places can be part of the banking private concealment system. It doesn't just have to be on Sand Hill Road, across the street from Leland Stanford Junior University, or Harvard in Cambridge, Massachusetts, you know, where we're most familiar with lots of nefarious activities going on at those universities, including and not limited to the United States military, which belongs to NATO. That's the Navy, that's the Marines, that's the Air Force, that's the Army, that's Black Ops, that's Wet Ops, that's whatever kind of ops they want to do. That's Gladio, that's Bayonet, and that's murder-suicide, which is their speciality. All right. I don't know if you people have been watching the fake news, but yesterday, Thursday, which was February 23rd, 2023, so if you abbreviate it, it's 2/23/23, 2/23/23, right? And before lunchtime in New York City, good old New York City, near Park Avenue, in the most expensive part of Midtown Manhattan, we had a banker get murdered, get whacked, which of course the media immediately called self-inflicted head wound, gunshot wound. That's code for homicide, okay? That's what the media calls a homicide. They call it a suicide. Thomas H. Lee, age 78, a gajillionaire, in the words of Tom Perkins, who said he never made $1 billion, but he made a lot of other people rich. Tom Perkins of Kleiner Perkins, venture capital firm at 2750 Sand Hill Road. Yeah, when he died, he had $8 billion. So here's a billionaire that doesn't know how to use basic arithmetic, right? So Thomas H. Lee, he's 78 years old. What do you know about him? He was found dead in his office, right? At the address of, got it right here, 767 Fifth Avenue. 767 Fifth Avenue. You can Google that. It's a big, tall office building. He was on the 6th floor. Dead. Gunshot wound. Absolutely no information available regarding the crime scene, because I'm calling it a crime scene. The media's already called it a self-inflicted suicide, so nothing to see here, just keep moving, right? That's what they called William Holden's situation. Self-inflicted tire iron to his head, but no tire iron found. Obvious suicide, right? Best friends of Ronald Reagan. Whacked sometime around November 16th, 1981, 1 week before Natalie Wood, age 43, goes swimming at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's a suicide, right? Christopher Walken would know. Christopher Walken was there, along with RJ, Robert John Wagner, RJ. He knows. So does the skipper of the Splendor yacht. He knows too. But anyway, the media call it it's an accidental drowning, just like William Shatner, his third wife, Noreen Kidd Shatner, good swimmer, with a broken neck, bruises and abrasions all over her arms and her body, naked at the bottom of 10 feet of water in William Shatner swimming pool in Studio City. Obviously, it was a drowning. Well, that's what they're doing with Thomas H. Lee, age 78. So what do we know about him? Very little, except he's from Boston, Massachusetts. Married twice, which is not too many times. You know, bankers tend to get divorced fewer than, you know, the Hollywood people do, which like 5 is the average number of divorces you should have, or at least 5 marriages. If you're going to be a big shot in Hollywood, you want to target 5 marriages. If you're a big shot, you know, superstar like Zsa Zsa Gabor, then it would be 7, or the woman from Rio de Janeiro who appeared in that film Summer of 42, Jennifer O'Neill. She was divorced 7 times. So she's up there in rarefied air. I think 8 times. Let me correct myself. I think she has the record at 8. All right. Robert Shapira, a.k.a. Bob Evans, he has 7 divorces. So that's pretty close, but I think Jennifer O'Neill beat him by 1. Anyway, so Thomas H. Lee somehow, some way got into the private equity, private banking, money concealment business. In other words, private, none of your business. And he founded a company in Boston which went by the name of... what did he go by there? It was Thomas H. Lee Partners, and that was from 1974 until 2006, when he decided to, I think, move to Manhattan, to the address where he was murder-suicided at 767 Fifth Avenue. Anyway, that firm was called Lee Equity Partners, and they had $15 billion under management as of yesterday. You can bet people are pulling their accounts today, right? Today's what you call redemption day, redemption Friday. And since it's 2:43 Pacific time, I'm going to say that they're running out of time. That has been stalled. There's no more redemptions of the Lee Equity Partners Fund until Monday. Monday next. Anyway, Thomas H. Lee has been married twice. He was married 27 years to Barbara Fish. You may know Barbara Fish. She's a socialite and part of the philanthropic community of New York City. They had 2 sons, Zach and Robbie. Barbara Fish was married to Thomas H. Lee from 1968 until 1995, whereupon they got divorced, and he very quickly married a much younger woman, Ann Tenenbaum, who is originally from Savannah, Georgia. Anyway, Ann Tenenbaum had 3 children with Thomas Lee, who would have been around age 53 when they became married. Ann would have been around age 28, so you can see there's a large age gap between Ann Tenenbaum and Thomas H. Lee. It's not uncommon. They had 3 children, 2 boys, Jesse and Nathan, and a daughter, Rosalie. So it adds up to 5 children that Thomas H. Lee sired. 5. 4 boys and 1 daughter, Rosalie. You should know that Barbara Fish is associated with her own foundation called the Barbara Lee Family Foundation. She's known as a national leader for women's equality, especially in politics and in contemporary art. I didn't realize there was an inequity of women in art. I mean, certainly there definitely play a big role in the porn industry, right? You can't have porn without women. So I don't know if Barbara Lee is involved with pornography, but she is involved with the contemporary art. And Ann Tenenbaum is too. Ann Tenenbaum sits on the Metropolitan Museum of Art Board of Directors. She also sits on the Studio Museum of Harlem, which I don't think they invite too many people to dinner from Harlem. Anyway, she's also part of the Center of Curation Studies at Baird College. Curation, how to present art, how to curate. It's kind of like what Abigail Folger was trained to be, but before they turned her into a banker and then terminated her at age 25. Also, Ann Tenenbaum sits on the Council of Modern Art. And most importantly, you should know that I had a client who's a big shot managing director of international sales for, I think, the world's largest stock brokerage firm, which is part of one of the world's largest banks. I won't say his name. He lives in a 10,000 square foot custom home over in Princeton, New Jersey. Probably takes a helicopter to the office, and in Manhattan. His office is in Manhattan. He's in charge of international investment sales worldwide. You'd recognize the name. Anyway, he sits on the board of directors for Metropolitan Museum of Art. So that means my ex-client knows Ann Tenenbaum, who is now a widow, because her husband, Thomas Lee, was murdered Thursday around 11 a.m. New York time. I'm calling it a murder because here's the thing, people. Bankers don't commit suicide in their offices. If they were going to commit suicide, which very few ever do, why would you? He's reported to have over $2 billion. Why would you commit suicide? You have a young, hot wife, okay? And you're going to commit suicide, and you have a daughter and five children, and you're going to commit suicide, and you have $2 billion? What's the problem? We just got through COVID, and you're not dead. This is lead poisoning to the head. This is a bullet. This isn't COVID. This is not a vax-related injury. This is a gunshot to the head. You don't do that in your office. If you were going to do it, you'd get in your car, drive to a park, and blow your brains at the park. They'd for sure find you, and your wife would be notified, and that way your secretary doesn't have to have the carpets redone at your fancy office at 767 Fifth Avenue. Because now they're going to have the whole, office redecorated because he's got brains all over the walls. Anyway, that's the latest. Thomas H. Lee, dead as a doornail, private equity banker, dead at age 78. So that caused me to, I hope that makes my ex-client a little nervous, because basically one of his cohorts on the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Ann Tenenbaum, her husband just got murdered. Do you think that couldn't happen to the managing director of international sales for investments? You think he couldn't catch a bullet? Did you see the movie 3 Days of the Condor? Yeah, they had a guy living in Chevy Chase, Maryland that got shot in the head by an Alsatian gentleman. Professional killer. Happens all the time. This reminds me of the film The Firm, starring Tom Cruise, Gene Hackman, Hal Holbrook. The Firm, which is about a law firm. I believe it was in Memphis, Tennessee, I believe. And it was a mob law firm for money laundering, right? And in the scene, the Tom Cruise character is approached by the FBI, who is basically, blind, carrying a cane and a seeing eye dog. And they want him to collect files and rat out his employer. And so it just turns out that Tom went to see his brother, who's incarcerated, his older brother, who puts him in touch with a detective by the name of Eddie Lomax, who's played by, I forgot the name of the character who plays, Gary Busey. Gary Busey plays the gumshoe detective Eddie Lomax. And one night, Eddie is with his secretary having some intimate conversations, and two bizarre-looking professional killers enter his office uninvited. A Nordic man who's alabaster, pale white, and he asks the infamous questions, "Why are you asking questions about dead lawyers?" And Eddie Lomax answers, "What lawyers?" And the man shoots him, and he says, "Who hired you?" Right? Well, I see myself in the Eddie Lomax role, because I am asking questions about dead bankers. Because we have Thomas H. Lee, who was murdered midday yesterday in Manhattan, New York, at 767 Fifth Avenue. But before him, of course, we had my other bankers that I've kept track of course. Abigail Folger, I talk about her a lot. She was really an art historian, curator, who got maneuvered into becoming a banker for the Robert Kennedy campaign and the mayoral race in Los Angeles with Tom Bradley and the Watts riot, rebuilding of that neighborhood after the Watts riot. You know, she wasn't in Los Angeles until 1968, and the Watts riots had happened, I think, 1965. And then they sheep-dipped Abigail to pretend, you know, that she was involved with urban issues, which, you know, that was just a sheep-dip her for that, because her main job was to provide cash money to operators within the Beverly Hills, Hollywood, West Hollywood area. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given her a home in Laurel Canyon at 2774 Woodstock Road. That's a Rand Corporation controlled house, lease, rented, assigned to operatives who either work at the Rand Corporation or are Abigail Folger and her control agent, Wojtek Frykowski, a Polish Jewish gentleman. All right, so anyway, we also have Roberto Calvi hung by an orange rope with a love knot, swinging underneath the Blackfriar Bridge, facing the central bankers of London, right? Masonic designed bridge, Blackfriars, with Argentine national colors. Then we have his cohort, Michele Sindona, being murdered 4 years later on May 22nd, 1986. Michele Sindona, who's from Messina, Sicily. He was the private banker for the 5 Cram families of New York. He was murdered with cyanide cup of tea. Again, May 22nd, 1986. At age 66. Roberto Calvi was 62. Ben Bugsy Seigel, he was murdered in Beverly Hills, right? Just a few blocks, 3 blocks from where Peter Falk lives. A few blocks, you know, away from Lionel Barrymore, Jack Benny, Lucille Ball, Jimmy Stewart, right? George Gershwin, Ira Gershwin. They lived 3 blocks from where Bugsy Seigel was murdered. At age 41, he was a private banker for the mob in Hollywood, and he was shot with a military M1 carbine semi-automatic rifle. Right. That was on June 20th, 1947. Ben Seigel was 41 years old. And he's Jewish. He's Jewish. And he worked for Meyer Lansky, who's Jewish. Both Ben Seigel and Meyer Lansky grew up as kids together in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, so probably not too far from the World Trade Center. And you all know that the World Trade Center is part of the New York port facility, right? So there is no way you could implode all those buildings down there, not just the Twin Towers and Building 7, but virtually all the other buildings were destroyed too, right? That's a port facility. You couldn't do that without military CIA clearances, right? Because those buildings were wired with some kind of sophisticated transponding explosive equipment. And don't you think that it's more than a coincidence that the so-called, you know, hijackers, they didn't crash into, Park Avenue, did they? No, they didn't. They didn't crash into Thomas Lee's office building at 767 Fifth Avenue. How come the hijackers didn't crash into 767 Fifth Avenue? It's a really tall building. No. And they didn't crash into Building 7 either, because there's no airplane hit that building. And yet it collapsed in free fall, liquefied, including the concrete, which is more concrete in Building 7 than there is in the Empire State Building. Okay? So concrete, steel, plastic, aluminum file cabinets, doesn't make any difference. All got vaporized, including, of course, the asbestos, the matriculates, which reigned over Manhattan for years to come. Those matriculates came from Libby, Montana, which killed half the town of Libby. Air that kills, the story of Libby, Montana. That story was told again, secretly, in Manhattan and New Jersey. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that Thomas Lee was murdered at age 78, and Roberto Calvi was murdered at age 62, Michele Sindona at age 66. Paul Castellano, you may remember him, right? He was murdered at age 70, right, in East Manhattan at Sparks Steakhouse. Paul Castellano had a money laundering role in the mob. Abigail Folger killed at 25. Erin Valenti, she was doing private banking, and she was trying to upgrade herself, and she's having a meeting with Jerome Kohlberg's KKR, and she's meeting with a Jewish banker by the initials of DJ, and he's Jewish, and he went to Harvard and had an MBA from Stanford at 2500 Sand Hill Road, and Erin Valenti was murdered at age 33. And the last person to see her alive was a managing director from KKR at 2500 Sand Hill Road, and Erin Valenti was murdered at age 33. I said 33, Masonic 33. Now I bring this up because then Don Valentine, the founder of Sequoia Capital, who brought you FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, and he also brought you, of course, Doug Leone from Mount Vernon, the Bronx, New York, and Don Valentine is from the Bronx, New York, and Jerome Kohlberg is from New Rochelle, the Bronx, New York, and Don Valentine died 13 days after Erin Valenti's dead body turned up in her rent-a-car about 20 miles south of 2500 Sand Hill Road. And Don Valentine was 87 years old. I just find it ironic that he would die less than 2 weeks after Erin Valenti, age 33, was murdered and discovered. That was on October 7th, 2019. And I bring this up because we still have Doug Leone, age 65. He's around, and he has approximately $6 billion, and he lives in Atherton, and he's still alive. He's got to be a little nervous because you can see when you hit age 60, if you haven't already been killed by age 33, then you tend to not go much past age 66, because I got a lot of dead bankers in their 60s. And, well, if you're lucky, you can be Paul Castellano and make it to age 70. Or maybe you could be like Don Valentine, who was the mentor for Doug Leone. Don Valentine made it to age 87. But you got to really worry about Paul Pelosi because, of course, his private equity business, which goes by the name of Financial Leasing Services Incorporated, which includes private equity, venture capital, consulting, and real estate speculation, all within the title of Financial Leasing Services, all private banking. And Paul took off in 1969 as soon as Abigail Folger got murdered and Enos Mejia was retired. And then Paul Pelosi, who's living in Presidio Heights, San Francisco, he takes off with Nancy, and they have a tremendous career. Because look at Paul Pelosi, how many near misses with death he's had. At age 16, on February 22nd, 1957, Paul Pelosi is driving a sports car, killing his older brother David on Highway 35 near the Crystal Springs Reservoir, near where Patricia Hearst went to school, where Sam Bankman-Fried went to school, where Charles Ng went to school at the Notre Dame Academy, close by. And Paul Pelosi ends up surviving a car crash that killed his older brother David, who was 19 years old. Paul Pelosi, age 16, survives a near-fatal car crash. Then, recently, we have him torpedoing Jesus Lopez on Highway 29 in Napa Valley in the town of Oakville as he's making his way home, falling down drunk on a Saturday night. The car wreck with his brother, it was a Friday night car wreck, and the car crash with Jesus Lopez on State Highway 29 was around 10:15 p.m. on a Saturday night, and it appears that Paul Pelosi had a passenger in his 911 Carrera Porsche performance car, which was totaled, and Jesus Lopez's Jeep was totaled, and nobody died. But there's Paul Pelosi. That was on May 28th, 2022, recently, and he didn't get killed, but he was found guilty of DUI driving, which they reduced to a misdemeanor because, you know, he's a special person. It's a felony. It's a felony. Then, just a few months after that, 5 months after that, on exactly 5 months after that, October 28th, just before Halloween, trick or treat, then we have the infamous hammer attack at 2640 Broadway, where Paul Pelosi does not reside. He lives on Pacific Avenue, 1 block up the hill. But anyway, for purposes of psyching you out, he has a hammer attack where he doesn't die. And he's taken to the Zuckerberg General Hospital, which is the hospital furthest away from where that scene, that address is, 2640 Broadway. If you were concerned about his trauma injury, you should take him to St. Francis Hospital. It's about a mile away. Or you could take him to Pacific Presbyterian Medical Hospital, which is actually a few blocks. They don't have an ER anymore. They relocated it to Haight-Ashbury. There is a hospital over by the University of California, San Francisco has an ER in the Haight-Ashbury area, and that also is about a mile and a half from the hammer attack. So those two hospitals are pretty close. But no, they take him to Zuckerberg Hospital, which is about 7 miles away, and a heck of a lot more stoplights and intersections. I mean, it's 25-minute drive to half an hour drive. So I'm not really clear on why they do that, unless perhaps he wasn't hurt in the first place and it's a hoax. It's a hoax event, and we're just playing it. You know, it doesn't really make any difference where you take him because he's not really critically ill. So Paul Pelosi's got to be a little nervous because he's 82 years old. He's not going to be 83 until tax filing date, April 15th, 2023. Paul Pelosi will be 83 years old, but he's only 82. And Nancy Pelosi, she's only 82. Her birthday is March 26th, so she's got another few weeks before her birthday. I wanted you to know that if you look into these private bankers like Thomas H. Lee, he looks exactly like, when you read his, they've already got like a preliminary obituary where they say he's a pioneer of leveraged buyouts. And that's what they say about everybody. That's what they said about Jerome Kohlberg. That's what they said about Don Valentine, that he's the godfather of Silicon Valley. That all these guys, these financial geniuses, first of all, none of those people had any finance background in the first place. And number two is leveraged buyouts have been going on as long as banks have existed. So none of these people are the godfathers or pioneers of leveraged buyouts. They're aggregators. They're in the aggregation business. They're in the destruction of small business empires to create large corporate centralized control facilities. That's what they're all in, okay? And you should know that before Thomas Lee was declared the pioneer of leveraged buyouts, because he flipped Snapple to Quaker Oats and made, $1 billion profit. Before he did that, we had Michael Milken of Drexel Burnham Lambert. You know that Michael Milken is Jewish, right? And you know that he attended a private CIA school in the porn industry. Right next to where they killed Francis Gary Powers at the Sepulveda Dam Reservoir in Van Nuys, which is right next to Encino. And I'll be real specific as they can be. Michael Milken attended the Birmingham Community Charter High School at 17,000 Haynes Street, 17000 Haynes Street. You can Google that. I believe it's Van Nuys. I think they call it Encino. But that is, it's just a few hundred yards from where Gary Powers of the CIA was murdered in a Bell 206B helicopter on August 1st, 1977, which would have been after Michael Milken had graduated from high school. Michael Milken, of course, went on to UC Berkeley for his undergraduate, and then he went to the same school that Donald Trump went to, which is University of Pennsylvania, Wharton Business School, to get his MBA. Michael Milken is Jewish. He was good friends with Sally Fields, Cindy Williams, and let's not forget Michael Ovitz, who became the CEO of Disney Studios, when Michael Eisner, who's also Jewish, was the chairman of the board of Disney. And Michael Ovitz is Jewish, and he was the CEO of Disney when Michael Eisner was the chairman of Disney. And Michael Milken is Jewish. Michael Eisner is Jewish. Michael Ovitz is Jewish. All three have the same first name, Michael Milken, Michael Ovitz, Michael Eisner. All three are Jewish. All three work with Barry Diller. Barry Diller is Jewish. That encompasses Paramount Pictures, NBC, ABC, CBS, Paramount Pictures, Disney Studios, the Magic Kingdom, where they capture your mind and thereby capture you, the person. And they are all approximately the same age as Thomas H. Lee. Thomas H. Lee, dead as a doornail at 78. Michael Milken is still alive. He has over $6 billion. He is approximately 76 years old, Michael Milken. So he's just 18 months or so younger than Thomas H. Lee, who's dead. Donald Trump pardoned Michael Milken, if you didn't know, on February 18, 2020. Donald Trump, who's an alumni from the Wharton Business School, pardoned Michael Milken, who had a felony record and was sentenced to 10 years in prison and a $600 million fine. He actually served 22 months, and then Donald Trump pardoned his felony. And everything's all good. Everything's all good with Michael Milken, who's a prostate cancer survivor. He wants you to know. Drexel Burnham Lambert, they were doing leveraged buyouts before Thomas H. Lee was. All right, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Got another dead banker. If you want me to run a quick list, I can give you 10 bankers who are dead. I'm going to include William Colby, the CI director, because when he retired, he worked with a number of private banks for Eurasia markets. And also William Casey, who had a very strong financial background. Even though he worked for a law firm, he was assigned to Wall Street and municipal bonds and revenue bonds and moral obligation bonds. So William Casey had a money laundering background, as did John Mitchell. I forgot to mention that besides the fact that they're the same age and they both attended Fordham University, they both grew up in Queens, New York. William Casey and John Mitchell both grew up in Queens, New York. Okay? So William Colby had a banking background, and he was murdered at age 76. William Casey had a banking background, and he was, suicide murdered, brain tumored away at age 74 before he ever could testify about what he knew or couldn't remember about the Iran-Contra scandal. John Mitchell of the Watergate scandal, Attorney General of the United States under Richard Nixon, he was murder-suicided, done away with at age 75. So those are 3. Then I got Ben Bugsy Seigel, murdered at age 41. Roberto Calvi, murdered by our orange rope at age 62. Michele Sindona, age 66, cyanide tea. Paul Castellano, killed in a barrage of bullets at the Sparks Steakhouse in East Manhattan. All right, Paul Castellano. Abigail Folger, bayoneted 28 times with a military M7 bayonet, age 25. Erin Valenti, given a glass of water or bottled water or a tea or something, and then she dies at age 33. Right? And then I got Don Valentine dying 13 days later. That's 10. That's 10 dead bankers under mysterious circumstances. So why am I asking questions about dead bankers? Who hired me? I had some crackpot actually say that I worked for CIA, but I was doing a really bad job. And then also I'm in the basement of my mother's house too, of course. You have to throw that in. So I hope you enjoyed my show. Have a great day. Please hit the like or subscribe. This kind of wacky content you get here. The story of dead bankers. Have a great day.